This episode of Digital Life is brought to you by Contentful. Contentful is a powerful CMS that lets you create, manage, and distribute content. Find out more on how Contentful can help you create your own content model at contentful.com. That's contentful.com, and be sure to follow them on Twitter at Contentful. That's CONTENTFUL.
You are now experiencing the Digital Life with Kevin Lockett.
Hey everybody, welcome to the Digital Life. On today's show, I talk diversity and tech PR with Caroline Kawashima from Babbel PR. Now, a few months ago, Caroline wrote a blog post entitled "Focusing on Diversity as the Next PR Innovation," where she highlighted that tech PR has the same diversity issues that affected the tech industry as a whole. I'm always confused when I walk into companies and I see a lack of racial diversity. Diversity is not a bad thing. In fact, it's something that most companies should embrace. When you have people from different racial backgrounds, they bring their own unique life experiences, which might not only launch a great new groundbreaking idea, but also might bring that company a new audience. But unfortunately, most companies fall back in the same stereotypes, or they just hire people they want to hang out with. But by doing so, you're not only missing out on new leaders and innovators, but you're just missing out on plain old good people. People that might enrich your life, personally and professionally, because they are different from you. I had a great time talking to Caroline about diversity, and we also talked about her journey into PR, being a baseball mom, and places to eat in San Francisco. I'm telling you, after I talked to her, I wanted to pack my bags and move to San Fran because there's so many great places to eat. So without further ado, here's my conversation with the very insightful Caroline Kawashima.
Okay, we're talking to Caroline Kawashima. How are you today?
Very well, thank you. Thank you so much for having me.
No problem. So before we get into tech PR and diversity, I want to ask you about the Ross Valley Little League. So you've been involved, you've been involved with them for a while, and I'm just intrigued because you're a start supporter of them. So tell me about this Little League.
So the Rossville Little League is actually, just a local Little League in my hometown, and there are hundreds of Little Leagues all across the United States. It's a wonderful sport, baseball, and we basically probably have over, 200 kids in the program from ages 5, as young as 5, all the way up to age 12 of different levels in the league, and it's a spring baseball program.
So I see you tweet some things about baseball. Were you a softball player before, or did you just love baseball?
I was not. And in fact, when I first got married to my husband, he was an avid baseball fan and loved watching baseball all of the time. And I actually hated baseball. And I would always complain that baseball was the longest season of any sport, and I didn't understand why it had to be so long. But, I have 2 sons, and both of my boys, of course, started playing Little League baseball. And just by watching them play, I just really fell in love with the sport. And so now I'm officially, I guess you would call me a baseball mom, and pretty much always on the field or near a field. And both of my boys play almost year-round. We're kind of a crazy baseball family.
What positions do they play?
Both of my sons are pitchers.
Oh, okay. That's pretty good. Now, speaking of your hometown, are you born and raised in San Francisco?
No, I'm not. Actually, I was born and raised in the Los Angeles County area and spent most of my childhood there up until college. I attended the University of Southern California. Yay, go Trojans. And then I actually lived abroad in Japan for about 7 years, working in various capacities with Japanese companies and with American companies. And then when I came back to the United States, I actually was on a trip visiting the wine country and drove through San Francisco and the Bay Area and just kind of fell in love with it and just decided that I wanted to relocate and live in the Bay Area. And interestingly, at that time, and this was quite a long time ago, but at that time, the tech sector was just kind of coming up. So it was a very exciting time, to be in the San Francisco Bay Area and just to kind of see, all of the things that were happening in computing and with Apple and with, chips and it was just a very kind of, invigorating, exciting time to be in the Bay Area.
Yeah, you caught the wave at the right time because, like you said, you were pretty much at the ground floor when everything was really starting to move along. So, I mean, it was probably a lot easier to get into tech companies or the tech industry back then.
In some ways, yes. And ironically, even though, my professional career was in public relations, no one, there were more people that were doing kind of broader marketing and tech marketing. So when I first moved to this market, it was very difficult for me to kind of find a job just because I had been out of the market, working in a foreign country abroad, was not local, from the area. My first job and foray into working and representing tech companies was actually for an integrated marketing firm where I was doing things like sales promotion, channel marketing, in-store retail promotion, a little bit of advertising, and sales collateral development. And, they did everything in the marketing mix except PR. So it was a little funny that I was the one PR person, working amongst all of my colleagues, but doing everything except, PR. But that served as a really good launch pad for me because I was able to learn more about how technology companies market themselves, and better understand, how the public relations fits within that marketing mix. And that served me very well to, get my foot into the door to start working from the technology PR side.
Speaking of technology and PR, so you recently wrote a piece a little while ago entitled Focusing on Diversity as the Next Tech PR Innovation. Mm-hmm. What made you decide to write that piece?
I think really it's obviously a broader hot topic in Silicon Valley as well. And I have always been, being a person of color myself and being one of the few people of color throughout, my past career, it was always something that I personally experienced, being more of a minority, in public relations. And so I was always very conscious of it. And, when I started to see more broader kind of local business media attention to kind of the diversity issue in Silicon Valley, it really kind of struck a chord with me. And I began to think back of the various public relations agencies where I had worked at, and where as much as, 13, 14, 15 years ago, I remember the same conversation taking place within the industry, where one of the editors of a public relations agency publication had called out the industry and had said, every time I come to talk to any agency that I am in front of, he said, unfortunately, he goes, I'm not seeing a lot of diversity. And he had called that out about 12 or 13, 14 years ago, as I said. So it kind of struck me as I was beginning to see this media attention about the lack of diversity in the technology sector. I just thought, wow, really, in a blink of an eye, 14 years have passed and we're still having this conversation, which is why that inspired me to kind of write that blog post, because as I was seeing, as I said, media conversations about, Yahoo or about Google and, what they needed to do to increase diversity, I said, well, that also applies to, the tech PR industry and all of the agencies as service technology companies, because as much as technology companies need to diversify in terms of their workforce, the agencies have to do that as well, because those are the companies, that we service.
Yeah, I always find that curious, even for firms around here in Akron, Cleveland. I would look at advertising firms and PR firms, and I wouldn't see diversity. I would see very little diversity. And I would say to myself, it's hard for me to believe, with so many people graduating from school, so many people out there doing marketing, it's hard for me to believe that you can't find people who have diverse backgrounds who can add something to your firm.
I think a lot of it also comes from The field itself, I mean, I think whether you're in marketing, if you're in marketing or you're in a creative capacity and working, in a creative agency, whether it be public relations, whether it be digital marketing, whether it be to some extent social media today, it does take a certain personality type. It is very externally, oriented. So you not only have to have very good and confident communication skills, but you also have to be more of an extroverted personality, or at least I would say, I think in the marketing field, extroverts are rewarded. And I think when I can only speak, of course, for myself, but for many Asian Americans and Americans of Asian descent, that is culturally not the way that they were raised. So it's not something that would come up naturally, nor was that behavior encouraged as you were growing up. The message to Asian American kids is keep your head down, study hard, become a doctor, or become a lawyer, because those are respected, professions that kind of give you that kind of broader respect and credibility. I do think it's changing because as each generation becomes more kind of mainstream and Americanized, if you will, or westernized, if you will, they grow up, no different. If I look at my kids, they're, no different than any other kid, at their school because of their upbringing. And I would think, to a certain degree, whether it be Hispanic or even an African American, student population, once again, those traits of being kind of very extroverted or being very showy or speaking out are not things that particularly are, reinforced, in the home. So I think part of it is cultural. I think the other part is access, because this business is a people business and a connections business and a relationship business. So the way that, many times the way that, you get the opportunity for a job in this sector is many times through word of mouth. And so I think other candidates are, because they have those natural relationships, either through their parents or, through their aunts or uncles or through friends of the family, they have access to information about those jobs. Whereas I think students, of color, where their family or their extended family may not be in those positions, they just wouldn't have access to hear about an internship or to even learn about, the industry and what it entails. When we talk about public relations, it's even more mysterious than marketing. I mean, I've been doing this for over 20 years, and even my own parents still don't understand what I do. They keep calling it advertising because that's the easiest thing that they can think of, but they really have no clue about what I do. So, access is really, very important. So those organizations and nonprofit organizations, or whether it be, people like myself that are in positions of leadership and influence, it's really important for us to understand, those factors. It's not a matter of just hiring, candidates of color. It's also understanding, the cultural implications. It's also making a conscious effort to extend your recruiting and your reach beyond just your immediate network.
Right. I think I read that you said you were working with Latina managers to help kids get into the pipeline and create those connections and accessibility to these organizations.
Yeah, that's really important. What I mean is by, reaching out, into your local community, whether you're, a tech company, there's a lot of kind of scrutiny right now, and I think some of the big tech companies that are very successful, like Twitter, for instance, that have a huge, office here in San Francisco, they have moved into, there's a lot of discussion around tech companies and the gentrification of neighborhoods and how tech companies are kind of pushing out local communities because they're raising, the rent, or the real estate value is skyrocketing because all of these tech companies are moving in. And I know that, a lot of these companies, once they move into a community, especially if it's a community that they're drastically changing, a lot of those companies are consciously trying to make an effort of going outside their front door. and basically looking at the local community and saying, okay, what kind of job training could we do? Could we offer internships? Could we work with the local schools? And that's great to see, because I don't think that was something that immediately came to mind when a company would open up its doors in any part of the city. Part of that is because there's more public scrutiny over that, and because of social media, it's hard for a lot of successful companies to kind of do anything right these days without being watched. But I also think that it's good because it forces all of us to be able to say whatever community that we do, business in, we are a part of that local community. So it makes sense to, give back to that community as much as we can. And whether that means reaching out into, the local school system and the public school system to, organize volunteer days or career days, or offering up your company or your office for a tour, or reaching out to the local university and trying to, reach out to some of those entrepreneur groups. Those are all small things that every company can do, but it takes a conscious effort. It's so easy just to say, we'll just have our regular recruitment program, which will go out to the usual, suspects and the usual, universities. It really takes a conscious, effort to say, yeah, this is what I want to do, and this is important, for us. And I also think, the other challenge is I've mentored many, young PR professionals, not many, but I mean the ones that have been of color or ethnic background. And I think, too, the other danger is sometimes when you work so hard and you get to that place, you assimilate. And I think that you tend to kind of, I don't want to say forget where you've come from, but you've worked so hard to kind of be integrated. So I also, call upon, those young people who have integrated, who come from diverse backgrounds, for themselves as well to reach out. And I know some of my young mentees that I've had in the past, that they are actively involved, in their own community group, and are conscious of that. So, it kind of has to happen on multiple levels, but I think the important thing is just kind of keeping that stream of consciousness, very active and purposeful.
Who helped mentor you as you were going through your travels, working your way up in PR and tech?
It's funny because I don't think for me I ever felt like race or being a person of color was an issue for me. And it could have been because I was just more naturally socially oriented, and I've always had friends from all different backgrounds. So I never felt kind of stigmatized, in that way. And the role models that I have over the course of my career were not necessarily whether they were black or white or Asian. It was really that they just took an interest in me, as a young professional, and gave me, the opportunities. Now, that's easy for me to say, because if I were to compare myself to, a Latina or a Latino, high school student, a young person, or an African American, student, I think that their experiences are very different from mine. And so I do think that to some degree, there are certain maybe stereotypes that, Asian American kids are, there's one that's very obvious. Asian American kids are smart. And I don't think that's necessarily true, but for some reason, it's just kind of assumed, they're studious, or, they're, polite. And that's not, that's just such a blanket statement. And, Asian American kids, there's smart, really genius kids, but most kids are just average like everyone else. So I think that I benefited weirdly to some degree from that kind of assumption. But I still had to prove myself, and I still had to, fight for things as much as anyone else. And I just was fortunate in that I was able to have the opportunities, throughout my career to be able to prove myself, and to be able to work with some great people. So I never felt like, my ethnic background kind of held me back. The only instance in which it did was when I was younger in my career. I did often get feedback from my managers like, you're so polite, or you should speak up more, or you should be more vocal. And again, that's a little bit of a cultural thing, because the way I was raised was that, you don't speak until spoken to, and if you are going to speak, you say something of value. You don't just speak for the sake of speaking. And, in American business, it's very different. And if you're not vocal, and if you don't speak up, and if you don't stand up for yourself, you'll literally just be overlooked. So I did have to learn that, but I had to learn that pretty much on my own, through trial and error.
Speaking of your parents, what was that like when you told your parents that you were going into PR? Going back to your earlier point, where that was
they had no idea. They had no idea. They really had no idea. And every single time I try to explain to them what it is I actually do, they still don't understand. And it's kind of a running joke. And I think that it's just not because my parents were Japanese American. I think that probably if you were to talk to any young person in PR and ask them, do your parents know what you do? They probably would say no. There's more, I think. There's more like, popular TV shows like Scandal and, that kind of give people a broader sense of what, a communication strategist is. But often it's kind of, exaggerated a bit to the dramatic. So I would love to say my job is as glamorous as, Kerry Washington's in Scandal. It's not actually that glamorous.
Yeah, I don't think you're covering up murders. That would be interesting.
Yes. Yes, but I do love that show, by the way.
I do. I love the show.
And again,
well.
that's something, again, because we have, young people have shows like that now where there are positive role models for them. A woman of color, of tremendous power in Washington. Those are positive media images, right, that young people can see, where even though they know that that's just a TV show, still the fact that, she is, playing that role, and that she is, being respected and admired for her, acting ability in that role. Those send very powerful messages, I think, to young people and for young women of color to be able to say, yeah, I could do that. I could be like her if I wanted to. But when I was growing up, it wasn't like that. There were very few Asians and Asian Americans in roles on mainstream TV, and if they were in very kind of stereotyped roles.
Yeah, I saw a documentary from George Takei last year, and he was talking about that, about the roles that he played, and it was very stereotypical type roles. So yeah. What is the networking scene and the organization, tech PR organizations, like for Asian Americans out there on the West Coast?
I know, we had talked a little bit about this, and, there are several kind of business, like Asian American business networking groups, I know, that are quite active here. For tech in particular, I haven't seen any, and it may be that I'm just, again, not, there may be some, I'm in San Francisco, and there may indeed be some in Silicon Valley, or certainly on some of the, larger university campuses like Stanford or UCSF. There are many, many tech networking groups which, are comprised of, people from all backgrounds. I do know in certain communities, such as in the Indian community, I just heard about actually an African American tech group led by a couple of African American entrepreneurs, which is great, to see. And I'm sure that, there are some other, maybe a Chinese American type of group. But I do see those tend to be more of, a lot of tech workers who have kind of immigrated from their home countries to work here for tech companies. So it's more of I think a local, network, a local and kind of country level type of networking than it is kind of for, Indian Americans or for, Asian Americans or for African Americans. But I'm sure that, there are many and that are popping up. But I'd like to see, more kind of, organizing and kind of, collaboration, across the board than what we have now.
Switching back to pop culture, because you mentioned scandal, you had tweeted something which I didn't think about, but it's true. You tweeted out PR peeps are starting to pitch CEOs to the Late Show, and I saw Tim Cook from Apple on there, and it's true. Like, his show has only been on for a week and a half, and I've seen 3 tech CEOs already on there, which is actually a smart move.
Well, yeah, and I think that that's just, kind of indication that technology is now mainstream. Because, once you start seeing technology CEOs kind of on celeb status with mainstream media, then, certainly here in the San Francisco Bay Area, technology is, the key economic driver for the city. And I would guess that it is for every major, metro, across the United States. Every new building that's going up around us is, largely being driven by the tech industry, and whether that be, new legal firms and professional services that are servicing those tech companies or the tech companies themselves, that's a key driver. And so, it's great because technology is finally very, very much mainstream. When I first started in this business, only people in the tech industry knew what technology was, and certainly middle America, you had people on the right and left coast that were very, early tech adopters, but everyone in the Midwest just was kind of still, far behind. And I don't think that's the case anymore. I think that technology has become so pervasive and so a part of our everyday lives that most people would probably admit that they can't do without, some level of technology, whether it be their smartphone or, whether it be their Roku device at home, or whether it be, the latest, navigation app they're using, in their car. So that's the exciting part. And I think that the promise of technology was always to be able to, free human beings up so that, we could do greater things, or use that technology for greater good. And hopefully, we'll see that generation happen.
You said something that reminded me of my mom. You were talking about your boys, and you said they bring out the very best and the very worst in me, but my greatest responsibility is to help them grow into decent human beings. And it's like,
Yes.
that's true. Like, I'm sure I gave my mom multiple heart attacks growing up, just the way I behaved. But it's true. But and it seems like you're very engaged. Like, you have this high-powered PR tech job. At the same time, you seem to create a schedule where you're very involved with your boys' lives.
I think, it's hard for women. I once read a book, and I'm sorry, I wish I could remember the author of the book, and I actually gave it away, and it never came back. It was that good of a book. But it was actually a journalist who had interviewed. She was actually probing the question of why it seems that working moms band together and stay-at-home moms band together, and they seem to kind of not be able to respect each other. So she kind of set out on this journey to interview women, whether they were single moms, married moms, working moms, part-time moms, stay-at-home moms, because she was trying to find out, what is a good mom? Is it a mom with a full-time job? Is it a mom with a part-time job? Is it a mom that's a stay-at-home mom? Because there seems to be, this misconception that a woman who becomes a mother has to be a certain thing. And the interesting thing about her finding was that she realized it is irrelevant whether a woman works full-time or part-time or stays at home. But what's important is what makes a woman happy and feel fulfilled. And if she finds that fulfillment through being home, or she finds that fulfillment working full-time, that's what makes her a better mother. So, as we all know, a happy mother is a good mother. An unhappy mother is a really hard time, has a really hard time in the family. And I think that I've learned that, over the course of my career. It's funny because sometimes my friends will say on my Facebook page, "Oh, you're a super mom," and I honestly don't think so. I think that I struggle just as much as any other mom, whether they work or they don't work. And I think that I have some friends that are very successful, C-suite executive, powerful women with careers that are also mothers. and some of them choose to be very involved with their kids' activities, and some choose, to be less involved. But whatever makes them feel happy and fulfilled, they find the balance that's right for them. For me, I've always been the type of, working mom that I wanted to be there for every baseball game. But for one of my friends who is a high-powered executive, she's okay with not being at every baseball game, and her kids are fine with it too. So I think it depends on what you can live with and where you want to, spend your time. But I don't think it's an either or. It's just a choice that you make.
So I've never been to San Francisco, but it looks like a lovely city. So if I ever make my way out to San Francisco, what are some great places to eat?
Oh, God, that's such a hard question because literally I feel blessed that I could just walk out the door from my office and every day I really don't know what direction to go because not only do we have fabulous restaurants, so many restaurants, but, now we have all of these food trucks and these, creative cafes. I even joke and say, we have a Walgreens drugstore down the street, and even they have upped their game in terms of trying to provide, fresh lunch and breakfast items. So we're really spoiled. San Francisco is certainly a food mecca. I would be hard pressed to kind of pick any one restaurant because there are so many. But it's a wonderful thing. And you could literally just, eat your way through San Francisco, because we pretty much have everything that you can think of, under the sun available. And then, of course, because we are also, we have so much agriculture here, and, access to organic fruits and vegetables and local farmers markets, we really are spoiled. And I find that when I travel, to other cities, I'm really happy when I come back home because I feel like in other cities, even if they're larger cities, sometimes they don't have as much access to local, organic or local farmers. And so we really are spoiled, and we really, benefit from that on an everyday, basis. So it's a wonderful thing.
Wow, I really need to get out there.
Yes, you do. I'm biased. I am biased. I just showed, in fact, one of our young colleagues from London, which London is a great city as well, spent about 2 weeks in our office here in San Francisco, and it was his first visit to San Francisco, and he literally was blown away, and he couldn't believe, the scenery, the view of the Golden Gate Bridge, the food, that kind of the, vitality and the excitement of, the local tech scene here. And he was very, very impressed, and we were joking, and I said, but, you're in Europe and in London has this fantastic landmarks, and he said, yes, that's true. But San Francisco is definitely, a special place. It's not an easy place to live. It's very, very competitive, because you're literally sitting on the bleeding edge of, of the next big innovation in tech. But it's a very, exciting and I think an exhilarating city to work and live in.
I can imagine. Well, Caroline Kawashima, thank you for the conversation. If people need to learn more about you and learn about Babbel, where can they go?
They can either go to our website, which is babbelpr.com. They can follow me on Twitter. My handle is @Ckawa, Ckawa. Or they can just kind of look me up on LinkedIn. But I really thank you for the opportunity. And as I said, I was so pleased that the blog post and the contributed article resulted in, so many people reaching out to me. It does make the world seem like a smaller place, when you're kind of bound by a common cause. So it's been a wonderful result of that writing, and I look forward to talking to you again.
Yeah, what type of responses did you get from the blog post?
It was interesting because, of course, you reached out to me, which was great. I received, some very nice comments and, tweets on Twitter that they really, enjoyed the article and they thought that it was good and provocative, reading. And speaking of actually out your way, there was a wonderful nonprofit group that reached out to me called the Brand Lab. They're in Minnesota, in the Twin Cities there, and they are a nonprofit that has been working actively in partnership with various creative agencies to do the very thing that we talked about, which was to provide internships, to provide access and networking to high school students, in particular of color, so that they can have mentors in the creative agencies, business, be exposed, to the opportunities, have opportunities to do internships within those organizations and kind of get a leg up. And the woman, Ellen Weintraub, who runs that organization, reached out to me. And we began talking about, what we might be able to do together to extend that group into San Francisco. So I'm very excited about that. And here, I never would have thought that, someone from Minnesota would have, reached out to me and, offered that kind of opportunity.
Oh, and what are some of your favorite apps and gadgets?
I do a lot of driving because I'm a baseball mom and go to many, many tournaments, both, in Northern California as well as out of state these days. So I cannot live without the Waze app. It has helped me so many times in terms of finding alternate routes to, various baseball stadiums that I've had to find very often in very obscure places and little towns. And I also like Slack quite a bit. I use it quite a bit for work to keep in contact with my colleagues in London and my team here in San Francisco. And then I recently was told of a great baseball training app, which is called Coach's Eye. So I'm going to check that one out. But it allows you to upload video of your player and allows coaches to, view the video with you and make markups on the video so that, they can more effectively kind of make those course corrections and help the players develop. So I'm definitely going to look up that one.
Yeah, you have to let me know how that works out for you. That sounds pretty cool.
Yes. Well, there's so many now, right?
Yeah, it's hard to keep up.
It is hard to keep up, and I read there was an interesting stat on National Public Radio. It was actually a couple of years ago, but it actually made me laugh out loud because they were talking about smartphones and all of the many features and functionality now on a smartphone and all of the apps. And the study basically said that the older you are, the less functionality you need. And I just couldn't stop laughing because that's so true. Most of my kids, I think, now find most of the features on my phone and are showing me, how to get around and what apps to use and what shortcuts to take. And it always amazes me how they just, innately understand and find out about those things.
Yeah, that's when I found out I was officially old. Like, I thought I was young and hip. Yeah, not too much anymore.
Yeah, I used to be the one that, in Tech PR, they used to bring home the cool news. And now when I bring it home, my 15-year-old would say, oh, that's so 6 months ago. I definitely have no news value anymore of anything hip and cool in my family.
All right. Thanks a lot, Caroline.
All right. Thanks so much, Kevin. I really appreciate it. Bye-bye.
I want to thank Caroline Kawashima for Babel PR for being a great guest on The Digital Life. Be sure to check out her blog post focusing on diversity as the next PR innovation, which is very good, so please check that out. And you can follow her on Twitter at CKawa, that's CKAWA. On today's show, we're going to start a new feature as I focus on new music. Today, we feature Akron's own Wesley Bright and the highlights in their new song, Losing You. Make sure you follow them on Facebook at facebook.com/Wesley Bright and the highlights. They're a great retro 60s band. If they're ever in your area, please check them out. They're a whole lot of fun, a lot of energy, and they're fantastic. All right, everybody. It's The Digital Life. I'm Kevin Lockett, and I'm out.
I can't believe it myself.
Life with Kevin Lockett.